thanks for coming out and hanging out with us here at Crossroads Apologetics again tonight. This is our sixth, I think, presentation that we've made, and every single one of them have been here at the Tuscany Event Center. And just a little heads up, normally we have flyers for our next event. Our next event is scheduled for the 15th of next month. However, it will not be here, and it's to be at a location to be determined. So I'll send out emails and post it on our Facebook page and on our web page and that sort of thing. So you'll know where it's at. But they've got some other events and other activities here next month. And so I think for probably a couple months we're going to change the venue up a little bit, and then hopefully we'll return here after a while. But anyway, hope you guys can join us. Yes?
Do we have the same cookies?
Good question. The same quality cookies, yes. We will have cookies and coffee will be a staple of Crossroads Apologetics from here on out. It just has to.
Don't disappoint.
No, Nate, I would not have it any other way. Tonight's talk is by Dr. Nate Noble, and we want to go ahead and introduce that talk here in a little bit, but not just because I love the sound of my own voice, but I want to introduce it a little bit and maybe share a little bit about what's going on with me. I went down to visit my dad a couple weeks ago, and we went through a bunch of old papers, and he's kind of getting some stuff in order, and he wanted me to be up to speed with where all his important papers were and that sort of thing, kind of important father-son conversations, and he wants to know where all the stuff is in the event that I would ever need any of that stuff. So we went through a whole bunch of things, and I love my dad because he's really organized and squared away. He's an ex-Marine, so he's got everything right exactly where it's supposed to be, and I just love that about my dad. And after we got through going through all of the important documents, he pulled out a little coin and he handed it to me. And he said, I bought this for you in 1976. And he said, I've just been holding on to it ever since. And he said, but it's yours. And he said, so I figured it's about time I give it to you. And so he handed me this little coin, which might not seem like a lot from where you're sitting, but it is a 1 ounce solid gold Krugerrand from South Africa. Mm-hmm. And he had taken a trip to South Africa with my mother 40-some years ago. And my wife and I and our kids got an opportunity to go back to South Africa, and in 2010 was the first time, and ever since then we've kind of fallen in love with the place. And so we've been back a few times since then. And so this had some real powerful meaning to me when he handed this to me. And it got me thinking about what's important in life, because this was a rare find. This was unique, and this was wonderful. And I love my dad, and this was something really special to be handed from him, and something that he had kept, in his good care for such a long period of time. So, anyway, don't steal it, but I'll pass it around. It's worth a couple bucks.
What was the price of gold today?
It's awful valuable, but maybe even, just pass it around. Maybe that even makes the point too, because I started to think, what's really important in my life? Because I can't take that with me. I mean, I could even put it in the box with me when I go, but it's not going with me. And so what's really important in my life? And what's important in my life is my relationship with Jesus, period, bottom line. I mean, that's, when I think about whatever kind of catastrophic things could happen in my life, I think about that. Nothing could really be that bad because I've got Jesus. And because I've got Jesus, I've got eternity and I've got forever. And I get to hang out with all of you guys forever and do these apologetics talks forever, whether you like it or not. But yeah, so that's kind of the thing I wanted to punctuate. And to even emphasize that some more, I am playing the role of a bachelor at home this week and next week. My beloved wife Danielle is off to the Holy Land. She went to Israel with a group of people, and a couple days ago she got baptized in the Jordan River. It was a big deal. And this morning she called me, actually FaceTimed me from a Holiday Inn in Jordan. She was in Jordan, And they had climbed up on this hill and looked over into the country of Syria, and they had a guide there with them. And Danielle told me with, her kind of heart pounding a little bit, told me about seeing the planes go over and a bomb explode. And the guide was telling them that there's genocide happening over there, and it's horrible. And so Danielle and her group of people that were over there were praying prophetically that God would bring peace over Syria. And it was a powerful thing that she was doing. She was sitting down having a little espresso, and she said, Jeff, can you hear this? And I certainly could. I mean, it was thunderous how loud it was. And she said, look at that. And she turned her iPhone around, and it was kind of grainy and pixelated, but you could see these fighter jets just... And she was not in a good place, She felt protected by God, but she was in a... That took some of the value off of that. but she was not in a good place. But anyways, that's what's going on with my wife, and I miss her dearly, and I want to be able to be there with her and experience all that stuff and protect her and everything. And then I've also got some stuff, my mom dealing with some health issues, and there were some really big moves that happened the last couple of weeks. And my daughter, Meredith, is a freshman in college, and she has successfully completed navigating her freshman year of college. And because Danielle is out of town, I got to drive up to Minneapolis yesterday and unload half of her dorm room and bring it back, which is kind of a heart muscle, kind of a big, experience, the first bringing your daughter home after her first year of college. So these were big things that I was experiencing. And I love all my other kids, and I can tell you everything that they got going on, and they got wonderful stuff going on, but I've been busy too. And so I get a little bit cranky and I get a little bit fussy. And I found myself this morning after talking to Danielle in a really sour mood. I was just mad, to put it bluntly. And I didn't really know what to do with myself. And I sinned. And whatever that sin might look like, whether it's worry or anger or frustration or acting out, whatever it is, I did that. Part of my human condition. And then I felt worse on top of all that, because I felt like I was a loser, and I started to, embrace all these negative thoughts and all this kind of stuff. So what did I do? So I reached out to a friend. I reached out to one friend for coffee this morning and had an uplifting experience and felt elevated after I did that. And then I went back home and I called another friend of mine. I'd already placed a phone call earlier in the day, and he called me back. And we visited for a long time. And what he talked to me about, if I could come to my point, is he talked to me about the story of Peter. And he said, in a real funny way, he said, Jeff, Peter was like Jesus' best friend. He was like his best buddy, he's his fisherman and all this kind of stuff. And he said, but he was a little bit of a lummox too, he made all these mistakes and did all this silly stuff and whatever. And he was the one that wasn't going to deny his friendship with Jesus. He wasn't going to deny who Jesus was. And he said, the first person to call him out on that was a little servant girl, a little kid. A little girl said, aren't you the guy that's been hanging out with Jesus? He said, no. And so he denies Jesus. He denies his best friend. He makes a mistake. And he walked with Jesus and spent time with Jesus and done all this stuff. And he blew it. He totally ruined it. And then later on, after all this stuff happens, Jesus confronts Peter, and what does he say to him? He doesn't grab him by the back of the shirt and bring him up in front of the class and say, look at this loser, look at what this guy did. He doesn't do that, no. Instead, he says, quietly off to the side, just between Jesus and Peter, he said, do you love me? Peter probably felt terrible. I felt terrible today because I felt like I'm tired and worn out. I wish I was reacting to my life circumstances better than I am. I can't imagine how Peter must have felt. He must have felt terrible. And what did Jesus do? He didn't accost him and beat him over the head. He said, do you love me? And Peter said, I do. And then what did Jesus do? Then Jesus gave his job away to him. He said, then feed my sheep, which couldn't have been more of a compliment to this guy who betrayed him and made all these mistakes. Instead, Jesus says, feed my sheep. You're the guy. You're the best of the bunch. You're going to do this from now on. You're going to tell my story, and you're going to love on people just the way I am. And that's what Jesus does. When we're struggling and when we're having difficult times, he elevates us to what our real value is. You know, I like the shiny gold piece. I like the shiny, pretty little thing. And that's valuable to me. But what's really valuable to Jesus is me and all of you. And he emphasizes that with the stories that he tells in the Bible, like the story he told of Peter. Anyway, that just really brought it home to me when I was talking to my friend, and I was so grateful to hear that. And my day is finishing so much better than the way it started because me and some friends talked about Jesus today when I was having a difficult day. And it changes everything. And the only reason we do that is because it works and because it's true. So that's why we get together at Crossroads Apologetics, so we can elevate the name of Jesus and we can talk about what kind of impact he's had in our life. So anyway, I miss my wife, and it's a good missing my wife, and I'm praying for her, and she's going to have a great, awesome, wonderful trip. And I'm going to get when your wife's gone, all of the Father of the Year point totals are doubled. So I'm just going to keep slobbering on those kids, and I'm going for Father of the Year again this year. I'm going to lock it up this week and next. Emmett and I are off to a soccer tournament tomorrow for the weekend, so I should really, maybe those are triple points. We can go do that. But anyway, so grateful that you guys are here tonight and that we can fellowship together. So let's enjoy a nice, engaging talk by Dr. Noble and enjoy the fellowship with some good, rich conversation and feel ourselves elevated. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, here's next. And somebody got to give me my gold coin back.
Very good. Well, again, thanks for coming back. More mics, just because we record these talks so that we can kind of go through on the internet. So I know you can hear me, but that's why I'm mic'd. And again, thanks for coming back. When I became a Christian, I was 20 years old. I was 20 years old at the University of Northern Iowa. So I am a Panther. There's actually 3 state schools here. I don't know if you guys knew that. There's Iowa State, and UNI. There's 3. And I was at the 3rd one. And I was in the monk reunion, and I was studying, and I just had a very powerful experience. And at that time in my life, Christianity, business was good. Business was good. It was all that was talked about for the most part, according to my experiences at the university. It was an increasing number of people that I came across. Every church I set foot in was a good church. By and large, most people in the Midwest that I had met at that point had a fairly similar view or construct of what was appropriate life, appropriate behavior, much of which espoused biblical principles. This was in early 2000. It goes without saying that since that time in my Christian life, business has changed. And the title of our time together, the title of the talk for tonight is Christianity Going Out of Business? And my hope in the time that we have left is to share with you my thoughts. First of all, I want to talk a little briefly about how do you decide if the business you're looking for is going out of business. Turns out, I'm not a business person, but it turns out people know. There's subtle signs. Maybe some of you have ever worked for companies that have turned over or been taken over. There's subtle signs that you can look for that tells you that your company's not going to exist for very long. So I'm going to talk to you about those. I want to submit to you that while on the surface, in college, business seemed good in regards to Christianity, and while oftentimes when you look at the media and you see the nature of the church in America, or particularly in America, it's easy to come to the wrong conclusion about what's the state. Is this a business growing? Should I buy stock, or should I just pack up my things and go? And I hope to convince you in the time that we have that is not the case at all. According to a recent article written in Time magazine by a woman named Kristen Baylor. This was published in 2016. She published several ways in which we can understand whether or not the business that we are working for is going out of business. I want to share with you 4 big takeaways from that. Hopefully give us some time then to discuss. Point number 1. The first way to decide if your business is going out of business is when the executives, bosses, CEOs, managers all run. Okay, that makes sense. So if the ship is sinking, and I'm on a ship, and I'm out at sea, I'm having a good time, I'm sitting by the pool, and all's well, and I look over my left shoulder, Jeff and I are there, talking about the deeper things of Christ, and we look over our shoulder, and we see the captain of the ship. Look this way, and then jump over the side. That's a bad sign. And when you think about how this relates to Christianity, let me unpack it in just a minute. So in a book written by Ross Douthat, and the book is entitled Bad Religion, How We Became a Nation of Heretics. He espouses that there are 5 major catalysts that have pushed Christianity in America to the state in which it's in. One of which, the 5th catalyst, Douthat describes as Christianity's loss. I'm going to say this again. Christianity's loss of the elite and academic cultural institutions. So what does that mean? Well, if you think about the founding principles of some of the great public institutions of higher learning in this country, what do you think they are? Throw out some names. What's one of the top level institutions for higher learning in this country? Harvard, Yale, Princeton. All of these organizations have as a bedrock foundation, all of them have as a bedrock foundation an espoused belief in Jesus Christ. But when you look at the nature of the academic environment, the rhetoric that streams from these organizations in current day, it pales in comparison to its initial intent. And Douthat describes in his book that when Christianity loses a foothold in the major academic institutions of a culture, it begins to lose its grip. Because individuals that come from these places, what do they go on to do? They end up, these being people who control several things. They control the media. They control newspapers, academies, publishing, the arts, foundations, government, and business. This is where many of the leaders of the next generation come from. And so what we have, according to Douthat, is a great disaster. One of many that contribute to a turning of the tide, a questionable going out of business sale for Christianity. Because the rhetoric from the major thought centers and the major news outlets has changed dramatically, even in the last 20 years. But what I want to submit to you is that this idea that the CEOs have left the building, okay? This idea that the company we work for in Christianity is tanking, it is not entirely true. Because when we think about who the CEOs of this country are, or the CEOs of the Christian faith in America, when we think about how that affects us, when we think about higher education, what I want to submit to you, according to Pew Research, is that it's a commonly held belief that the more educated you are, the less Christian you'll be. Okay? Have you ever heard any semblance of that? Like, don't let your kids go to a liberal college because they'll come back thinking something that they shouldn't think, right? And what we've learned is, while that is a commonly held belief, truth be told, as time's gone on, that has come to be untrue. What we've come to understand is that higher education does not necessarily, higher education, it is true in a sense, equals lower religious commitment. Okay, now we know that that is true, but what I want to submit to you is that Americans in general that have college degrees report attending religious services as often or more so than individuals with less education. So what we're saying is that even though there may be less individuals at higher levels of these organizations and institutions that are espousing the Christian belief, those that are hold true. They're as likely or more likely to go to church and be regular attenders than individuals who are less educated. Christians with higher levels of education appear to be just as religious as those with less. In fact, the more highly educated a Christian is, the more likely they're going to espouse their church, their belief systems. Examples. Who's heard of a man named Ben Carson? What's Ben Carson's claim to fame? Neurosurgery. Pioneering neurosurgery to separate Siamese twins. If you haven't read the book, Gifted Hands, highly recommended. Great movie. Also, a recent presidential candidate. A born-again Christian. Alvin Plantinga, one of the most prominent current-day philosophers, a professor of philosophy from Notre Dame, widely espoused to reinvigorate the movement of Christian apologetics in the philosophical realm. One of the greatest thinkers in our philosophical day, born-again Christian. And lastly, Francis Collins. Who knows who he is? Anyone heard of that guy? My pastor recently mentioned it in a sermon, but as soon as he did, I got all excited because I know exactly who that is. Francis Collins is the head of the National Institute of Health. He's widely believed to be one of the greatest geneticists of this century, responsible for sequencing the human genome, which has changed medicine completely. Also, a born-again Christian. So my first point as we conclude this section is what I want you to understand is CEOs have not left the building. I was blown away when I got into medical school and into residency and fellowships to realize how many people that I met espoused a belief in Jesus. And more so, the thing that was even most interesting to me was how many people were not offended by my belief in it. In fact, they were more so and more likely to engage in me in high-level Christian conversation than any environment I had ever been in my life. Far more than in college. I was far more likely at the University of Iowa to engage in a very high-level biblical discussion about the truths of Christianity with an MD, PhD than I had ever been with anybody else I'd ever met. They weren't averse to this. They came and asked me about it because they just generally wanted to know. So I want to submit to you as we end our first point, is that the CEOs of culture have not left the building. That we still as a Christian culture maintain a very high level of academic rigor, and that is not diluted in any way by our pursuit of truth and knowledge in the public sphere. If anything, the deeper I've gotten into the academic circles that I was able to travel with in my training, the stronger it made my faith. Because if it's true, it always leads you to Jesus. If it is right and true and good, it is not to be feared. It is not to be battled against. What I say to my children, what I've said to my colleagues, I say, listen to me. If you don't love Jesus, and you don't like what I have to say about the cross, fine. But you promise me one thing. You follow truth all the way down to the bottom. You do that, and you'll see me standing there. Because we're going on the same place. CEOs have not left the building. Point number 2. According to Kristen Baylor's article, she has a second point that she submits to us. First is, you know your company's sinking when executives and CEOs leave the building. The captain jumps off the ship. Well, what's another way? Another way I'd submit to you is when your company or your organization, the communication streams that connect people together begin to disintegrate. They begin to disintegrate. Now, in early 2017, Sears announced that they were closing 150 stores across the country. Now listen, that doesn't sound very good. Okay? Now, when the employees learned of Sears closing all these stores, the majority of them weren't surprised. Because in 2015, on the vast campus of the Illinois campus of Sears, more than a dozen employees were huddled in this second story kind of conference room where they were going to teleconference in with their CEO. And the reason that they're not surprised is because this was the only way they interacted with their CEO. Okay, there's this running joke in Sears that the only way you get to see the CEO is virtually. Okay, this is a guy who pipes himself in from a mansion on an island off the coast of Florida. Okay, so when you're communicating with people, that is typically not an excellent way to do that, particularly when you're going to tell them that we're closing 150 stores. And right before the teleconference begins in 2015, one of the middle managers comes in and says to his team, what's this? That's fantastic. Oh, okay, I guess not. So one of the middle managers comes in and holds up a piece of paper. Because the guy's teleconferencing again, so he's coming in through here. The guy holds up a piece of paper. On the back of it, it says, "Don't say these 3 words." And he goes on to explain what they were. Because if you said these 3 words, the man coming through on the teleconference was going to go nuts. So there was this culture of poor communication, fear and trembling All of which, when the closures came in 2017, nobody was surprised, because when you don't communicate effectively, when you don't embrace technologies to make them work in the ways that people receive information and contribute information, the organization that you are involved in is going to die. It is going to die. I remember in college, I refused to embrace email. Okay, like I absolutely refused. I was not going to do it. We go to these sign-up things, and they hand around the sign-ups, and they'd say, "Everybody, put your email down on the sign-up," and I would just be like, "Nope, not doing it." So when I became a senior in college, I decided that I would go to the HR people and have them unlock my, because they gave me an email account that I wasn't aware of. I unlocked it, and there's 10,000 messages. And there was important stuff, like graduation stuff and credit stuff. I had no idea. I was like, I don't care what this is, I'm not doing it, right? I was not embracing technology in order to foster a message of communication to people. Now, oftentimes, when people think about the Christian church in America, and they question whether or not we're going out of business, they look at the way Christians choose to communicate, and they're quick to judge. They're quick to say, Christianity as a culture, as an institution, as a movement, has not espoused or embraced the technology necessary to communicate to this generation of people. Now, there may be some truth in that, but by and large, what we need to understand is that Christianity has always been on the forefront of the most cutting-edge technologies in history. Paul. Now this is surprising. This information came from an op-ed article from Christianity Today, written by Justin Wise, who's actually from Des Moines. So super cool. I was like, holy cow, I know that guy. So this is some information that he passed on that I thought was just fabulous. Paul. How did Paul communicate with his audience? What did he do? He wrote it down. In that time, he wrote it down on papyrus. Guess what that was? Cutting-edge technology. How about Martin Luther? How did he communicate his message? The printing press. He went on to say at one point that the printing press was one of the greatest and most majestic works of God, was the printing press. Because what did the printing press do? It made a message accessible to a people group. It took it out of the hands of the scrolls, locked away in the chambers, and made it accessible to us. Cutting-edge technology. Amy Semple. Does anybody know who that is? Amy Semple. She's the founder of the Foursquare denominational movement. And she came up with an idea to use the radio. The radio to communicate a message of Jesus Christ. And now you can't hardly turn on the radio and flip the stations without hearing several Christian stations being played. Billy Graham, what was his mode of communication? Television. Christianity has always been about cutting-edge technologies. If Christianity is going out of business, then we are very inconsistent with our history, because we have always been at the cutting edge of technology. Not because we care about technology, but because we have something so important to say. Example, if one of you had a grandchild or a child, and you brought them into the emergency room, and I walked into a room and I could tell that your child was septic. Okay, so they were in imminent danger of death. It is very unlikely in that moment that I'm not going to do everything within my power as a physician to find a mechanism in which to communicate with your child or grandchild's body in order to deliver effective medications and strategies. So if I can't get an IV to start, we're going to do something else. If I can't get it to go in, we're going to put it in a bone. If we can put it in a bone, we're going to find another way, because the alternative is absolutely unacceptable. Now listen. You have neighbors, you have friends, you have family, you have kids, you have children, you have husbands, you have wives. And what I want to submit to you is not unlike the child in sepsis. We have a cure, we have an antidote. And we need to be ready as Christians in this culture, and I'm going to submit to you that we are, in order to communicate that antidote by any means necessary. Because if I knew that I had something that wouldn't necessarily take away all your pain, but would ensure you that there would be no period at the end of the sentence of pain. Today was one of those days like with Jeff, where I saw several kids in the clinic, and I had to be reminded over and over and over again, it's because the message of the gospel that came through the printing press and papyrus and the radio and television and avenues like Gateway Church in Austin, Texas, where they're using an online digital streaming process in order for you to volunteer for their street outreach teams, in order for you to interact digitally with the environment and the culture in which they're in. If it wasn't for things like Focus on the Family, who are developing the Digital Engagement Center, where they have several staff engaged in counseling and administering to people around the world who are suffering and in pain virtually, because the world has become small enough for us to do that through the internet. If it wasn't for those kinds of things, I wouldn't be here. If it wasn't those kinds of things, there would be a period at the end of the sentence for every child I saw in the clinic today. There would be a period. Your life is hard. You have a genetic disease. Period. This is all it's going to be for you. This is as good as it's going to get. Period. When you die, you're going to go into an eternal nothingness of molecules smashing into each other because your life is meaningless. Period. But because Christianity has always been on the cutting edge, the front of every critical movement, because it's not because we want to talk, it's not because we like tech, it's because we're trying to provide antibiotics for a child who's going to die. Your neighbors are going to die. Your children are going to die. Your spouse is going to die. But there doesn't have to be a period at the end of that sentence, because as Christians, we are in a movement, we're captured by a movement that is not going out of business. As I've said just recently, we are on the cutting edge, and we will continue to be on the cutting edge because the message of Jesus Christ will never age, but the medium will change. Christianity is not going out of business because we're poor communicators. Point 3 of 4. Point 3 of 4. So, is Christianity going out of business because executives are making an exit? No. The high priests of culture, the smart, the educated, they're not turning away from Christianity. They're digging their heels in deep, and they're practicing it at a much higher level. Okay? Is Christianity going out of business because we're poor communicators and we don't embrace current technologies? No. We've always been, we are now, and we will always be on the cutting edge, not because we care about tech, because we care about message. Third, is Christianity going out of business because all the desks are empty? Now listen, if you get news on a Friday that your company's stock tanks, and you come in on a Monday and half the office desks are empty, right? There's nothing left but a few wrappers and some desks. You would have to come to the conclusion that maybe, just maybe, you might think about finding another employment opportunity. When I was in Cedar Rapids, I left Des Moines to go to Iowa City to do training in fellowship. And I went to Cedar Rapids, and I'd never been to Cedar Rapids before. Cedar Rapids is the second biggest city in the state of Iowa. And Cedar Rapids is a tough town. Is anybody from Cedar Rapids? It's a tough town. Okay, yeah. So my brother does outreach there. He does homeless outreach there. And just working with him and learning about him, there is just so many wonderful things that are happening there, but there's been a lot of struggle. And some of that struggle has been economic. I went to visit a mall in Cedar Rapids, and I was there. We had to visit a store. We had to go there. I don't know why. I was there with my wife and I think our 2 kids. And we were walking through the mall, and most of the storefronts in the mall were empty. They were just closed. And I came from Des Moines, right, where there's no empty rooms and malls. I mean, they're all open. And in this place, it was like an economic ghost town. And I thought, what on earth kind of city am I in? And it was scary. Now, when you think about empty desks, this is an example of a mall that's going under. When you think about empty desks as it pertains to Christianity, I want to submit to you a few things. Now, we all know that there's been lots of rhetoric about a decline in church attendance. We all know there's been lots of rhetoric about churches that are closing their doors, and there's truth in that. I had never before in my life, until the last decade, in my wife's hometown, there's a Catholic church that's now a dance studio. Okay. In North Liberty, Iowa, there's a small Protestant church that's now a place where you go to buy wedding dresses. I mean, this is commonplace. Churches are being turned into art studios. They're being turned into all kinds of other things. Never in my life would I ever have thought I would see that, and now it's commonplace. So there's truth in it. But what I want you to understand is that what's happening is not what you think is happening. Grace Davis is an emeritus professor of sociology at the University of Exeter in Great Britain. And in 2016, she was addressing in France a church planning conference, a group of attenders. And she had this to say about this concern of empty desks. She said the church planners, she said that there's been a change, but there's been a change in the decline in nominal or inherited Christianity. I'm going to say it again. The decline is not what you think. It's in a subset of Christianity that we'll call nominal or inherited. What does that mean? I grew up at the United Methodist Church in Northwest Iowa in Milford. I grew up 7 miles west on the farm. And every Sunday, we would all drive into town and go to the United Methodist Church. Why? Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't because of the dramatic sermon and illustrations and the PowerPoint and the movie clips. It was none of that. My Uncle Mike would sit, this is all coming to me right now, so this is fabulous. My Uncle Mike would sit over here and he would sleep like this. I mean, people who they don't even make an effort to hide their symptoms. Now he just had to open up his airway. I don't know what he had to do, but he did that, right? My dad would just do this. I would just draw pictures on like the sermon stuff. And the reason we all went there is because that's where my grandfather went. And my grandma. And all my aunts and uncles. Do you think I go to the United Methodist Church now? No. No, I don't. I don't even know if that church is existing now. I think it is, but it's about ready to turn over and partner with other churches because it's dying quickly in terms of the population base. And it's not because the message has changed. It's not because Jesus is not relevant. It's because nominal Christianity is on the decline. What it means is our children aren't just going to become Christians because we're Christians. They're not just going to go to church because we go to church. That is not the culture that we've raised. That's not the culture that I grew up in. That's not the world going forward. We are a ruggedly individualistic culture. We come to our own conclusions about what we want, what we think is best, and what fits best into our value system. And so we come to our own terms of Christianity. We don't inherit Christianity. We don't inherit political parties. That's all done. There's been a decline in church attendance. Yes, but in what? The nominal church attender. The person who is going because Grandpa and Uncle Mike want to see you there. That doesn't mean as much now as it did then. This is why, overall, fewer people born into church-connected families end up attending and belonging to those congregations less and less. But that's not the story. That's not the end of the story. Because when we think about church attendance and the decline in nominal Christians leaving the church because they don't want to inherit this anymore, what we see is that there's been a new movement of Christian faith that's growing in Western cities. Like, how many of you know that in the garden, it's difficult to grow up something new until something dies, right? How many know that sometimes the only thing we can do is know that when something burns down to the ashes, then it comes back up through the soil. What's the most fertile kind of soil? The kind of soil that has two things. It's excrement and ashes. And that, my friends, is what's happening. As nominal Christianity burns to the ground, growing up through that is something much more powerful, something much more contagious, something much more dramatically different. And it's happening in the most incredible places around the world. This is happening in Western cities. In cities. When you think about cities, you think about explosions of Christian faith. You think about a new and deeper and wider entrenched view of the gospel that's ready to weather the storm of the century that we're in. You don't think about it coming from Manhattan. You don't think about it coming from London. You don't think about it coming from San Francisco or Los Angeles. But it is. An influx of Christians from southern nations, China, and eastern nations, China, Africa, and many other places in the world. As those countries become more industrialized, those people begin to move. And in those countries, there's been such a flame that has been ignited in the heart of the Christian church that we can't possibly imagine. People getting saved all day long. People getting saved. People worshiping the streets. People hiding in worshiping because there's something that's so moving in their lives that when they leave those places, it begins to catch fire, not unlike a tumbleweed that rolls aflame into a dry and barren land of just deadness and just ignites the whole thing. And that is what we're seeing. There's been a rapid rise of Christianity as societies become more modern. These people move into Europe and the United States from Africa and Latin America and Asia, and they plant churches. They plant churches or they join churches and they reinvigorate. In Des Moines, this is happening. Some of the most vibrant churches that I've seen in Des Moines are filled with people who didn't grow up here. I mean, you don't have to go very far into Beaverdale to realize that there's some folks doing some pretty awesome stuff. I mean, you pull up at some of these churches, you're like, whoa, should I get out of here? And then you go inside and you see churches like Zion Lutheran's a great example. They're giving away food. They got food. Their church is a glorious food bank. And they're giving them all these things. And it's like a goodwill and a church and a community center. And it's just fantastic. And they're brilliant at serving multiple immigrant populations. So people are moving. And what we're seeing is that while religion that's inherited is declining in the modern age, religion that's chosen will not. So for those of you who are contending for your family members or contending or praying for those who are in college or worried about what's going to happen to the next generation, what we need to understand is that when given the choice, when people choose in that moment, or when they feel swept up in the Spirit and their life becomes Christ in that moment, they will grow and espouse a belief that will not easily or that will never be tainted. It cannot be taken away. So we have to take refuge in knowing that while there is a decline in Christianity from a nominal perspective, there is something else growing up in it that we'll call phenomenal Christianity. One more point, then we'll stop. So, is Christianity going out of business? Maybe our CEOs aren't leaving, our communication's not bad, our desks are not empty. And fourth, sometimes a company's going out of business because there's all these bad press stories, right? You'll hear about Enron, or you'll hear about Sears, or you'll hear about Goldman Sachs and the 2008 scandals. Like, you hear about things, you hear about this bad press. And I want to spend a little time as we close on this, because we all know that when it comes to bad press, as a company, Christianity is not looking good right now. Because so many things, I shouldn't say so many, really it boils down to a few contentious social issues. But due to a few contentious social issues, Christianity gets heaping amounts of bad press. Okay, so as a country, we're not, as a company, we're not looking good. But what I want to talk to you about comes from a book by Tim Keller. It's called his most recent book. It's called Making Sense of God. And in this book, he talks about this bad press, and he makes the following points. He says, "Listen, so much of Christianity, of the criticism of Christianity, of the bad press of Christianity, is based solely on the idea of a very high view of our own culture." Another way to say it, we are very much intoxicated by our particular cultural moment. Example. Let's say I go to China. And he tells a story of talking with an individual from China who was an academic. And they got into a high-level discussion. And they were talking about the validity of the gospel and what this individual believed about the gospel. And Tim Keller was asking the questions. And it came to the problem of hell. Hell's a great one to kind of pick, just to kind of talk about one of the many things that, as a culture, people in the United States tend not to like about the Christian doctrine of hell. Regardless of how you think about it, it's just not a good thing. People don't like talking about it. But in China, this person, discussing the problem of hell with this person, Tim Keller found that this individual really had no problem at all with the idea that there could be a God that could send people to hell if he wanted to. And the reason, this was not a hang-up to this individual at all, because in their culture, that very much makes sense. But what doesn't make sense, what problem did this individual have with Christianity? It was the problem of its individualistic nature. It was the fact that Nate Noble, should his life be swept up into Christ, then inherits eternal life forever, irregardless of my ancestors. Now, when you're from China, who do you want to spend eternity with? Your ancestors. It's all about honor and ancestry. Now, if you're from China, you've got a ton of problem with hearing that it could be potentially an individualistic salvation. But in America, we don't have any problem with that. Who are we? We're individuals. Rugged individuals. We're totally fine with that. Middle Eastern people. He tells another story of having the same discussion with an individual from a Middle Eastern country. And this individual also had absolutely no problem at all espousing the fact or believing that there could be a God that sends people to hell. And this person was remarking that if God created us, if there's a God that owns us, it should be up to him what he wants to do with us. Now, where was this individual's problem with Christianity? It was in forgiveness. Forgiveness. How can you forgive in Middle Eastern countries when there's genocide and people are dropping bombs on your relatives? When you declare a peace you declare arms and then one country sells arms to your country and then they're blowing up your family. It's hard to say, to espouse a biblical worldview that forgiveness is paramount. She was not. She's like, no. Now, when you think about it, how many people in America have a problem with forgiveness? Somebody cuts you off in traffic, you're mad at them, but you get it because you know what? You're probably going to cut off somebody next. That's just how it goes. We as Americans don't have any problem with forgiveness. We have no problem with a rugged, individualistic salvation. But man, oh man, do we have problem with hell. How dare that God do that? Because he would send somebody to hell. That makes me mad because I can't conceptualize a reason why, so therefore there can't be one. So what I'm trying to say to you is there bad press? Yes, but according to who? According to our cultural moment, according to this little niche in the timeline that is eternity, that we are in America, we come to these views, and then you have to ask ourselves, so is our cultural niche just better than the Middle East? Are we just better people than China? No. We just have different ways of thinking about it. So is there bad press in the United States? Yeah. Is it bad press everywhere? No. We're just really loud, it turns out. Truth be told, as we move to our conclusion, regardless of how upright we think we are, regardless of how just and true we think our political views are, or our financial goals, or even our personal health and wellness strategies, our great-grandchildren will look at some aspects of our life and be appalled. They will be appalled because their culture will be so different than ours. It's just fascinating to think about. So is Christianity going out of business because of bad press? No. Bad press according to who? According to what time period? The things that we hotly debate in this cultural moment right now were non-issues 100 years ago. And they'll be non-issues 100 years from now. But just because we're in this big heated moment right now does not mean that this institution is going out of business. It's not Christianity has to become offensive. It's the fickle desires of our cultural moment that makes it so. So let me conclude here. Christianity, as I've said several times, is not going out of business. I want to conclude with the story and we'll end. So if Christianity was a business and you were an investor, what I want to convince you of is to buy. Don't short the market here. Buy. Because you're going to come out on top. In 2008, when the market crashed, everyone freaked out. Okay? Everyone freaked out. If you haven't read or listened to or watched The Big Short, the movie, I highly recommend it. It's just mind-blowing. But in 2008, one of the most brilliant financial minds of our time, Warren Buffett, did something that nobody else did. Everybody was trying to pull their money out of the market. Everybody was trying. I was in an interest-only loan at that point in Coralville thinking that was a good idea. Yeah, bad idea, right? But Warren Buffett was doing something that nobody was doing. Warren Buffett was buying when everybody else was selling it. What was he buying? He bought trains. Warren Buffett bought trains. And the reason he bought trains is because it doesn't matter economically what happens. If you can't get products from one side of this country to the other, you're going to sink. And it's the end of society as we know it. So he knew that whoever bought the most efficient, the most effective, the most tried and true modes of transportation was going to win. And how do you think that worked out for Warren Buffett? Pretty darn good. Just like everything else that guy does. So let me submit this to you as we conclude. Listen, I want to encourage you to double down your investment. And I want to encourage you to buy trains. I want you to buy trains. If you're worried about the state of Christianity in America, don't be. Because it is never going away. Will we triumph? Will Christianity triumph over the world? Will all people become Christian? No. Will religion go away forever? No. It will never happen. So now is the best time in history for you to buy trains. It's the best time for you to invest in your eternity is now. So with that, I thank you for coming. I hope that you know that if you're contemplating Christianity, you're about to make a great investment. And I sincerely appreciate your attention. I guess I'll open it.
Yeah.
To some questions. Yeah.
Questions? Discussion?
Yeah.
Doctor, it does appear, though, with the mainstream media, if you will, very much bias of anti-religion, almost to the point where they want to ridicule the Christian right. So how do you kind of square that up a little bit with what you're saying isn't, the upper elites?
Yeah. When I think about the idea that, there's a faction of our culture that's irreligious, just as we begin to discuss this, to agree on terms, what I would submit to you is that my experience has been that there is no one that I've met that is without religion. They just happen to define morality and the kind of the boundaries of religion differently. Now, I might choose to define it from a biblical perspective, but the truth be told, these folks are also going to be every bit as religious. They have basic, very common, and clearly set ideas on what's right, what's good, what's fair, and what's true. But the thing that is interesting is that the jump intellectually, it requires them to go from there's no God and there's no religion. The jump, the distance there is not a small crag, where I don't believe there's an eternal God that provides a moral compass. But I'm going to have very specific views on the poor. Let's take the poor. So if you were to ask, like, say, someone who was maybe a news person or someone more of a, I don't know, we'll just say like a liberal, that doesn't really matter, but somebody who has a more like heal the world kind of a mentality, the truth be told, they would say, well, I'm not going to believe in your Jesus because you can't prove him. And I would say, prove to me that feeding the hungry is the right thing to do. Because we're operating under the assumption that there's certain things we should all just know, right? Like, I should know, you should just know not to steal, and you should just know not to deprive people of food. But truth be told, that premise is completely unprovable. You can't prove it. Now, can I prove Jesus? No. But you also can't prove to me that feeding the homeless is a good idea. And I think it's a good idea, and so does the Bible. But I jump from Jesus to that idea, and it's this far. But you jump from this ethereal nothingness idea to clear over here. What was this distance here? So when it comes to how Christianity or religion is portrayed in the media, I would first say that I would say that most media outlets that I've encountered, or we can say all, are the greatest religious espousers in our country. I mean, they're spouting they're spouting a large portion of tenets and practices where there's really no moral compass on which they're appealing to prove their points. If you don't believe in God, then you believe that we're all just animals and that we kind of got from here to here by eating the poor, eating the strong, eating the weak. So what difference does it make to me if a kid falls through the ice if I don't know him? We die, right? What difference does it make? So it doesn't make any sense. So I know I'm talking in a big circle. I appreciate your patience with that. But and truth be told, even though there are many Christians who hold very high positions in our culture, the number, as we've said, is fewer, but the devotion is deeper. So I wish I could tell you that there was people deeply entrenched in CNN and Fox, and there's just nah. But if they were sitting in this room, I would push back and say, you're every bit propagating religious culture as much as I do. The only difference between me and you is how far we have to jump to get there.
Something that's interesting to me in today's culture, corporate America, if I'm sick and you're my supervisor, you can't tell the people in this room what's going on with me. We just had a thing happen where a guy had a stroke, was blind, been with the company 35 years. And they wouldn't tell anybody what was going on. How can you love somebody if you don't even get to know them? Is that?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a good point. I mean, it's the idea of patient privacy in my world is really extreme. If you're my patient and I have a Facebook page, and you like me on Facebook and say, Nate, it was great to see you in the clinic today, and then I just like what you posted, I'm done. Because I've acknowledged to the world that you're my patient and that I know you. So don't become my patient. But I agree with you. But it's difficult because so much of what's beautiful about Christianity is this: it's the community of it, it's the transparency of it, right? But then so much of what we do is becoming inward. Garage doors go down. Wi-Fi connections are only for our house. Like it's not that anymore. So, yeah.
How is this going to affect our culture? You go fishing and you get in at night. You got 5 or 6 guys.
Oh, right. Yeah. I think that's a brilliant question. Like, I can tell you what, we can talk for hours about what I see in young learners, things I know you already know. I mean, and my question is, how can a device that's called a smartphone make people who use it look so stupid? You know? And I'm guilty as charged. Like, mine's beeping the whole time I'm sitting up. But I don't know. It's scary though.
Well, I think there's two things that you point out. One is what it's useful for as a tool, and the second thing is the dependence on it and what that does with your
Personal
relationships, which I think we can all agree that they erode those. You know, there's too much time spent doing this as opposed to, but to Nate's point, as a tool in keeping up with technology,
It was wonderful.
it's phenomenal and unbelievable.
Yeah.
I remember I saw John Lennox giving a presentation, and the Bible that he read from was on his iPhone, and he was scrolling down, and it blew me away that he was using that because it's such a handy thing. Also, I don't know if you guys have now this is like a advertisement. Maybe Crossroads Apologetics should get into advertising. But Amazon Echo, those little black tubes that you can speak into, I have one at home, and there's a new feature on it called the Bible app. So I can just say out loud, Alexa, open the Bible app. And she says, hi Jeff, what would you want me to do? I mean, seriously, just like that. And you can set up a reading plan. So I set up a reading plan just like this. Alexa, set up an 11-day reading plan with the book of James. And she'll say, your 11-day reading plan is ready. And I'll say, read my plan. And she'll go through and read. She'll cut up those chapters in the book to fit perfectly 11 days. And I just say it out loud, and I have my Bible open in front of me, and she reads it to me, and I go through and I highlight and I make notes. Now that's an unbelievable way to get God's Word into people with the use of technology. It's fantastic. It's remarkable. But I agree with the other piece of it is an eroding kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, as you said earlier, and as you're alluding to, every piece of technology that we develop, Satan can use as just like Christ can use it. It's our choice how we want to use that technology. I can use my Bible app, or I can look up pornography.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's just life. So it's not the technology, it's whether or not we have a relationship with Christ and choose to use it for the right thing. It's a wonderful technology for the Lord, but Satan can also use it. Well, that's true of everything in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good.
I'd like to go back to what Owen said before, with the dissemination of information and the rules that are made in society that you can't disseminate information. And the HIPAA laws, the teacher-student relationships where if a child goes to a teacher with a problem, he can't mention, well, I think maybe you can find that age or in church. That can't happen. So how do you combat that? You know, these laws are made, and we as sheeple follow them, or do we go off the reservation and say, you know, well, this is what I think is right, and this is what I'm going to do. How do you combat it? Because you could lose your job, that teacher could lose their job. So what do you do? I mean, there might be people that make our rules. It's a tough situation.
Yeah, well, in the clinic that I run, you know, as with, and there's a lot of parallels, but my goal is to provide the family with information. And then I tell them, look, what you do with this is up to you. You want to put it on a billboard? Fine. You want to scan it onto the internet? Go right ahead. I just can't do it. But I'm going to give it to you. You do whatever you want with it. So that's usually how I handle that. From a medical side, but you're right. If I was a teacher, I don't know what I would do. You know, I don't know. And in terms of being in the clinic, I don't open the door and walk through like the gospel unless somebody opens it for me. If they open it, then I'll walk in. But the nice thing, beautiful thing about the gospel is that it speaks to the heart of people. I don't have to quote Ephesians to help someone know that they have eternal value, significance, and worth. That shame and guilt are worthless emotions, primarily. And that there is a great and beautiful purpose on their life. And I can say all those things and not once portray a Protestant Christian worldview. I can just come off as a really nice guy. So I found that there's just so much beauty in the way that translates to people. Because if my goal is to love them, if that makes them feel that's love, then, you know, but maybe I should push harder to your point. It's good.
Well, this is interesting, because one thing that I would add, I was late coming here tonight because I had to bring my son Emmett home from a little soccer practice that he had. And he was telling me on the trip home about he's got one final paper to turn in before the school year is over, and he's so proud of this paper, and it's about capital punishment. And he has taken a position about capital punishment, and it's a page and a half, Dad, and I need you to edit the paper and do all this kind of stuff, and he's 12, and he's just remarkable. And so I was giving him some opinions about capital punishment. We were talking about this kind of thing, and it got to talking about Christianity. And he said, whoa, hold on, Dad. He said, I can't bring that stuff up at school. He said, there's two things you can't talk about at school, are politics and religion. Because he said, I've got kids that believe different things in my class. And he said, I'll get in detention. I'll get in big trouble with the... Now, I'm not sure if he's going to get in big detention and get into trouble. But it brought up a really interesting, you know, thing for us to talk about, a real world example. And we talked about when the people tried to trick Jesus and they told him, do we pay taxes or don't we pay taxes? And he had them give him the coin. And he said, whose picture's on there? And he said, Caesar's. And he said, give Caesar what is Caesar's and give God what is God's. And so I put it in the same context with my son. We follow rules and we are respectful of our teachers and we do that sort of thing. But we also remember who we belong to. And it came back to exactly the point that you were just making, Nate. I told my son he can be a Christian and be about love and all those sorts of things without shoving it in somebody's face. But he can be that example in school, and they'll see it, and they'll feel it, and they'll smell it. And I'm curious if other people have had those kind of conversations or those kind of questions put to them yet.
Well, my wife is a retired teacher now, but her entire life as a teacher, she always had a Bible on her desk and Christian things around her, and always answered questions from students about those things that showed that she was a Christian. And she taught her whole life. And just decided long ago that if I can't do that in my job, then I don't need to be here. I need to be somewhere else. And she never had an issue. Talked to many, many kids about Christ.
Yes.
I think one valid point about that, like whether it's in the school day or the work day, there's the, okay, now we're not on that clock, but I've built a relationship with the person. And now we have a conversation in the parking lot. And then, I'm all for that you live your Christianity and they know that you live as Christ would want you to. But at some point, the Holy Spirit will want you to give Jesus credit by saying his name. And I think that's what happens in the parking lot after work. And that is something we need to be ready to do.
I love how you underscore the connection. I tell families in the clinic, listen to me. What you want more in your child's life, what you want more than anything is not obedience. You want connection. You want connection with your kids. Anybody can foster obedience out of fear. I can make my kids afraid. right? But that's not how God relates to me. I'm not afraid of him, right? Because he loves me. That's not how a child you want to interact, but he wants connection. And I love that because when you connect with somebody and they see that you care about them, not that you have an ulterior motive, that you're trying to force a gospel or stab it into them. That's not your point. Is that I care about you either way. It doesn't matter to me what you do. I just love you as a person. No matter where you go or what you do, I'm for you. Then you've got to run away to land the gospel out of their lives. But not before then. Not from mine. Some people have different experiences. But my experience has been, without relationship, it's only rebellion. It's just me trying to sell them a vacuum cleaner. That's it.
Good. Other questions? Other comments?
In the context of your, for the closing of the smaller churches and stuff, did you talk about corresponding increase in larger churches? So,
Yeah.
like 4 or 5 smaller ones close, but
Right.
they form a
Yeah.
larger.
That's a great question. I did see one discussion on the fact that the vast majority of people in America attend churches that are 100 people or smaller. So there's still a distribution in terms of the smaller congregations. My sense is, and I don't have a lot of data to back this up, but my sense is just, seeing, like many of you, seeing how culture works, that the trend towards big churches getting bigger is probably at its peak. I would suggest, because I just think that as the cultural tides come in and go out, I think that model makes it increasingly difficult to meet the need for a sustained community. But then there's lots of exciting things like church plants. Within a bigger church, they're planting satellites. I think that's an exciting venture. So, not that the whole idea is, but to answer your question specifically, I have not seen that more people are running for bigger.
Yeah, her hometown, her mother lives just outside of there on a farm, and she attends a Methodist church, and this is in Walnut Grove, Minnesota. And they've now combined 3 to,
Right.
Well, it's every Protestant church in that community.
Yeah.
Has one pastor.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. And it's so wild to think even 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I mean, the church that I grew up in is doing the exact same thing. I mean, they're thinking about it, so it's exciting.
Yeah, and the town itself has gotten smaller.
Right.
I mean, as farms have gotten so much bigger, I mean, her brother, along with his son-in-law, they're farming 1,200 acres now, and that, that's less people, and they can do it with big machinery. They were waiting, the last one, we were up there this spring, they were waiting on their 50-row planter to get there, and so that's less people, there's less opportunity, the kids all move away.
Right.
So the towns, and it just forces the churches, it's not that the churches have done anything wrong. They're having to live with the reality of the changes in the farming and just the economics of it.
Right. That's good.
I think this is a great subject you brought in tonight. I think this was very insightful because I haven't heard somebody attack this situation like you've done here. Because, I have a son and he says no churches are dying and all of that. And for you to come out and show the other side of it, I think is brilliant. And that's kind of what this whole thing is about, apologetics and so forth. But I do have one question. If this is the last question, I don't know. But my question is, you say you're a doctor, but it looks like you work 2 hours as a doctor and 8 hours in the gym.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say that I worked like 8 hours in a coffee shop, like a skate. I thought it was like, oh, this is because I looked like a slime ball. Oh, okay. Well, I'll take it.
I wish I had that job. I wish that way.
Well, no, I turned. Okay, so just don't laugh at me. But I turned 40 this year. That was how I compensated. I took up exercise. And I got gray hair. It turns out it doesn't matter what you do, you're still turning gray.
But thank you for the subject.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming.
coming.
Thanks for coming. That's fantastic.
I think that the gray hairs have to take some responsibility for where the kids are today.
Yep.
And my whole family, all 5 of us kids were sitting in that pew when we were kids. We all believe, big time believers, but the kids don't go to church.
Yep. I've got just, I'm going to speak to that just briefly. I promise I won't be long, but I really appreciate your comment. 3 thoughts. The first of which, people ask me, Noble, if you could do, we could do one, I serve special needs kids, so they'll ask me, Noble, if we could do one thing to help your kids in your clinic, what could we do? And I say, how about 2 things? The first of which, kids need better insurance policies, so fix that. But secondly, you know what kids need? Most kids, I mean, this isn't a slide on moms, but most kids I see need dads. They need dads desperately. I see a single mom every 60 minutes. And it's not just like, I mean, single mom with special needs kids, single mom with special needs kids with no car, no husband, no family, from Sudan, like every minute, every 60 minutes, I'll see that. So point number 1, that there is a desperate need, which just to underscore what you've already said. Point number 2, you know your culture's in trouble when you go into the 2 houses of greatest wisdom in the land. Where are they? What is it? Libraries? Empty. Nursing homes? Empty. That's where the wisdom is. I used to work in a nursing home. I remember sitting beside a pastor who'd been a pastor for 40 years and saying, tell me what's the most moving verses of the Bible. Tell me this. Play your harmonica. Tell me about World War II. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And so my point is, folks that have gray hair have a knowledge and a wisdom that if this culture isn't clamoring for it, you have to have patience because they're stupid. No offense, myself included. Myself included is going to the internet, so I'm stupid too. But my point is, but we are a system where we've been brought up to believe, and I say we as in folks, we'll say my age, we don't know how to ask for it. We don't know how to ask for help. Because a lot of us, I mean myself, I'm 40 as I've said, I was one of the first generations where most of our parents divorced. Mine didn't, and I'm thankful to God for that. A lot of my friends did. So what did we learn? How do we know how to be? So teach us how to whittle. Pull a 40-year-old man aside and say, hey, how's your marriage? Hey, can I take you out for a cup of coffee? But if you wait for us to come, we won't. Because we're filled with shame and guilt and fear, and we don't know, we have nowhere to go. But the North Star, the library of wisdom, is right in front of us. Play your harmonica. Teach us something. Don't assume we know, because we don't. We don't. The 30s almost ended me. I'm glad to be 30. I never want to be 30s again. I have 4 kids. It's crazy. You know, so I want to underscore what you're saying is absolutely true. I have a Martin guitar that was made in 1973. And guess what? The older it is, the better it plays. Do you know what the Bible says about people who age? It says you become more and more limber. It calls us people that can flow with the breeze. We're not rigid. We're not stiff. We don't buckle against the tide. We bend with it. That's what age teaches us. And we desperately need that in this culture. So if any of you ever feel like you've been put on the shelf of this culture, take yourself off. And don't assume that we know what we're doing, because look around, we don't. I'm blessed. I've got mentors all over the city. I'm so blessed. But the fruit of that mentorship is this time with you, right? But I can count every day, I can count 50 guys who don't have any hope in this, or moms. Holy cow. Women in this room, come find my wife and give her a hug. She needs a hug. So thank you for bringing that up, because that's a big deal.
What it means for us gray hairs. Don't just hang out with gray-haired people.
Right?
You have to go with the younger,
Yes.
the better, make yourself available.
Right.
Grow relationships. And you,
Right. Yes.
you, both Charlie and I, we've become mentors, not that we sought it. It was people calling us up or getting us in a corner. And
Right.
it just, it's not a full-time thing, and it doesn't take anything out of our life but add blessing to it. But you can't just hang out with gray hairs.
Right. When babies come into the clinic and they need to be immunized for vaccine-preventable diseases, how do we do it? We take a needle, we stab it into their leg, and we inject it. and it hurts. But if I don't do that, measles, mumps, and rubella, tuberculosis become real things. They kill people. When you walk around with the wisdom of the gospel in your life, if you have to take a needle out and shove it into the jugular of somebody who's going to wreck their life, do it. I'm not saying you have to be overly dramatic with the gospel, but love them. Demand that they come to your house. Demand it. Because they'll say no. They'll all say no. No, I've got too many kids. You've probably got doilies with breakable things. No, thank you. And say, no, I insist. I'll just come to your house. I'll show up at your work. Be very persistent. That's the kind of strategies that brought me into the kingdom. And you've been given that. You've been given the keys. So I love that. But don't wait. I love it. But if you're feeling aggressive, go for it, because your neighbors are not as good as you think they are. They're struggling.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else? Let's thank Dr. Noble one more time.
That's good.
fantastic. So our next Crossroads Apologetics event, and we do these every month. We're going to change the venue, like I said, and we're aiming at June 15th, and the topic is going to be why work. What does God say about why we should work? Why are we doing what we're doing? And trust me, he has a lot to say about that. So there's more coffee and cookies out there if you guys want to grab some before you leave. And if you don't mind, if I close us in a little prayer. There we go. So, Father God, we thank you that you are relevant and present, and we love you so much, God. You're our best friend, and we pray that you would just inform the hearts of the people here tonight and the hearts of the people that might be watching this from someplace else, God, that you're the most real thing in their life, Lord. And just help them to ask a question and open their ears so they can receive your answer, God. We love you so much, and we pray all of this in the precious name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. Amen.